How do you steal the world's most famous painting from the Louvre in broad daylight? How do you steal $100 million in diamonds using only duct tape and foam? And what happens when robbers turn not guns, but psychology and deception into their main weapon? This is a story of the greatest heists where the main weapon wasn't a gun, but intellect, manipulation, and audacity. To feel the full depth of the recent embarrassment of the Paris Museum, I'll start from afar. Former Louvre employee Vincenzo Peruggia enters the museum when it's closed to visitors. He's wearing work clothes like other staff, so he calmly walks through the halls, approaches the Mona Lisa, takes it down, and carries it to the nearest service staircase. There, he removes it from the frame and hides it under his clothes. At the exit, a real worker helps him with a locked door, mistaking the thief for a colleague. And Peruggia just as calmly leaves the museum with the painting. No chase, no screams, no noise. A couple years later, he tried to sell the painting to a gallery owner in Florence and was caught. Note the level of Louvre security at that time. Now let's jump to 2025, the era of surveillance cameras, lasers, sensors, and alarms. Uniforms still open doors, but now they work together with technology. Sunday morning, the museum is already open to visitors. A small construction truck with a lift pulls up to the building. 2 people get out. 2 more arrive on mopeds. All are wearing reflective vests like workers or utility employees. Using the lift, 2 robbers ascend to the second floor. With an angle grinder, they cut through the glass and enter the Apollo Gallery, where 19th century imperial and royal jewelry is displayed. Not bothered by museum visitors and staff, they also use the angle grinder to break open display cases with Napoleon-era jewels and leave through the same window. Below, all 4 get on mopeds and disappear. The alarm went off but didn't bother the criminals. In total, 7 minutes during which 9 pieces of jewelry were stolen: a necklace, earrings, brooches, a tiara. True, they either threw away or dropped one along the way. So Empress Eugenie's crown was recovered. The damage is estimated at $100 million, but the cultural significance of the jewelry and damaged reputation is priceless. Interestingly, in this haul was the huge Regent diamond, which weighs 140 carats and is worth approximately $60 million, more than half the total amount stolen. It's important to note that museum exhibits can't just be sold, especially a world-famous diamond. There's huge risk of getting caught. So most likely, they either took the royal jewelry on commission or understood it could be disassembled, stones extracted, and knew where to sell them. The version that the robbers feared the diamond's curse, which befalls all its owners, though it sounds nice, probably has nothing to do with reality. Despite professional execution, the criminals still left DNA traces and fingerprints. Soon, 7 suspects were detained. Almost all deny guilt, but one gave amusing confessional testimony. Allegedly, they acted on orders from an unknown person with a Moroccan accent and didn't know they were robbing the Louvre. They thought it was just a warehouse next to the glass pyramid. Also from his testimony, it emerged that the museum's security system was hopelessly outdated. Servers were hacked for several minutes. Security staff was reduced, and the password for surveillance cameras was childishly simple: Louvre. Culture humiliated, money lost. Now let's move where the stakes grow, but the main disguise stays the same: a uniform. 35 years ago in America, a robbery similar in boldness and notoriety was committed, which became one of the largest museum heists in history. Boston is considered the symbolic capital of Ireland in the USA, so every year on March 17th, almost the entire city celebrates St. Patrick's Day. Drinking, partying, losing vigilance. So it was in 1990, which 2 robbers took advantage of. They put on police uniforms and drove to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum at night. At that moment, a crowd of drunk teenagers passed by and noticed the cops were sitting in an ordinary civilian car, but didn't want trouble, so they didn't inquire and just walked past. The robbers didn't hide their faces, so they calmly continued implementing the plan. They rang the museum doorbell and told the guard there was a call about disturbances in the courtyard. Guard Rick Abbott let the police in and, as instructed, called his partner who was making rounds at that moment. While they waited for him, one of the cops said Rick's face looked familiar and that he was probably wanted, so he asked to see documents. Rick stepped out of the booth and handed over his license. They handcuffed him, and when the partner arrived, they cuffed him too. When asked what they were arrested for, the cops admitted, "This isn't an arrest, this is a robbery." After that, the robbers leisurely wandered through the museum and cut paintings from their frames. In total, they took 13 works of art, including pieces by Jan Vermeer, Rembrandt, Edouard Manet, and Edgar Degas. The damage exceeded $500 million, making it the largest museum heist. The most valuable item was Vermeer's painting, The Concert, whose individual value is approximately $250 million, half of everything stolen. Some of the stolen works weren't even the priciest pieces in the museum, and there were more expensive items nearby, which only fuels theories that they either had specific orders or simply odd priorities. Though you can't say they were in a big hurry either. Before leaving, the robbers destroyed surveillance camera recordings and printouts from motion sensors, but forgot about the hard drive where the data was stored. And then began a series of versions, theories, and assumptions. Initially, guard Rick Abath was suspected of involvement. He violated instructions when he let in the fake police and left his post with the panic button. And most importantly, surviving data from motion sensors showed that criminals didn't enter one of the halls from which a painting was also stolen. Rick was the last to visit it, but direct evidence of his guilt was never found. He passed a polygraph test, and besides, investigators concluded he didn't have the level of sophistication needed for such a crime. Insulting, probably, but at least he's free. The FBI, of course, also pursued gangsters of various levels, including famous crime boss James Bulger. But they all denied guilt, and there wasn't enough evidence. Over the long years of investigation, anonymous and open sources repeatedly appeared who allegedly knew the painting's whereabouts and were even ready to facilitate their return. But not one led investigators to the stolen items. Eventually, in 2015, the FBI triumphantly announced the crime was solved and named 2 robbers, members of the Italian mafia. Only they didn't have to arrest them anymore. Both had passed away in 1991. Convenient, isn't it? What do you think? Did they really find the thieves, or did the FBI just want to close the case? Or maybe that guard who became the easiest scapegoat is guilty. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. Periodically, information appears that some paintings were seen in different parts of the world, but none has been found yet. This proves what I said above. In most cases, works of art are virtually impossible to recover. They're stolen on commission for private collections and for pre-known buyers. We can only hope for amateur robbers who first steal and then think what to do with it and who to sell it to. We'll examine a similar case a bit later, but now let's look at a high-profile robbery in Japan, where the uniform again becomes a perfect mask, but this time the main tool is pure psychology. Uniforms are perfect cover for criminals from bystanders. Utility workers didn't arouse suspicion in Paris, and police inspired trust in Boston and in our next robbery, which only required props and acting. 1968. Tokyo. 4 bank employees are transporting 300 million yen. By modern standards, about $7.5 million. The money was intended for Toshiba factory workers as bonuses. On the road, a policeman on an official motorcycle stops them. He stuns them with news. The bank manager's house was just blown up, and according to operational data, their car is also mined. The armored car employees remember that just a month ago, the bank received bomb threats, so they fearfully climb out of the car. The policeman crawls under it to find explosives. And in a few seconds, smoke and flames start coming from underneath. The policeman quickly crawls out and yells that everything's about to explode. The bank employees, of course, run as far from the car as possible, and the robber calmly gets in it and drives away. That's simple. One person with a fake police uniform, smoke bomb, and striking self-confidence managed to take the car with a large sum of money from armored car employees. Neither he nor the money has been found to this day. Though in 1988 the statute of limitations on the case expired, and now he can boast publicly about his cunning without punishment. But still, the robber's name remains unknown. From uniforms and bluff we go deeper, literally, into the underground, where the main key is no longer a badge, but a tunnel. The next crime is a real paradox. Here, aesthetics and refinement are combined with dirt and hard labor. Let me explain. In 1976, photographer, socialite, and City Hall employee Albert Spaghiari learned that the Société Générale bank vault in Nice was located close to the city sewer collector. He immediately gets the idea to dig an 8-meter tunnel and climb inside. Spaghiari assembles a team and starts digging. To test the alarm's sensitivity to vibrations, they rented a safe deposit box and put an alarm clock in it that was supposed to ring at night. The alarm didn't go off. They dug for 2 months, moving through the collector on inflatable boats. And to somehow distract from the stench of sewage, the criminals posted provocative photos of women throughout the tunnel. The criminals entered the vault itself at the beginning of the weekend, so they had 2 days to calmly open boxes and carry out contents. Before leaving, they welded the door from inside so bank employees couldn't immediately enter on Monday. When the vault was finally opened, it turned out almost 400 boxes were opened and about 25 million euros were stolen. But what most amazed police were the remains of wine and food with which the robbers celebrated their successful deed. And the inscription on the wall, without weapons, without hatred, without cruelty. Feel how much grandiloquence and style is in this. True, within a few months investigators tracked down Spaghiari and arrested him, but he never made it to prison. During the trial, the robber jumped out a window and rode off with an accomplice on a motorcycle. And again, without shots, without casualties, pure aesthetics. Spaghiari fled to Argentina, moved between countries, and passed away in 1989. And it would seem the story ends there, but in 2010, a book comes out. The Truth About the Nice Robbery. The author hides under the nickname Amiga and claims he's the organizer of the legendary robbery, and Spaghiari was just an informant. As proof, he describes details of the crime and names all perpetrators. Vanity was his downfall. Police became interested in the author, tracked him down, and arrested him. He turned out to be Jacques Cassandri from Marseille. Though the statute of limitations on the robbery had passed, investigators found other sins for which he got 30 months in prison. Tunnels, sewage, champagne, and ego. Let's stay underground for now and move to another robbery where the cover story is construction, but the main weapon is again patience and planning. In 2005, a group of people rented a house near Brazil's central bank in Fortaleza and officially opened a landscaping services firm there. This was done so no one would be suspicious. Constant movement of construction equipment and removal of earth while they dug the tunnel. Work went on for 3 months. Everything professional, supports, ventilation, electricity. Eventually, they dug a tunnel 80 meters long, and again, on the weekend, they broke into the vault. The criminals had an informant in the bank, so they knew that at that moment there were bills withdrawn from circulation and intended for destruction, whose serial numbers couldn't be traced. They took out 3.5 tons of money, which amounted to $70 million. Everything seems precise and thought out, but let's not rush to conclusions. The robbers made so many childish mistakes, it's unclear how they even reached the vault. The rented house had a pile of fingerprints, DNA traces, cell phones, receipts, and various documentation, so police didn't have to strain much. And one of the criminals violated the main rule that everyone who even just watches heist movies knows. Don't flash money. This unique character went to a car dealership and bought 10 cars at once for cash. Trucks with his cars get stopped. Cash is found in the trunk, the criminal is detained, and they extract accomplices' names from him. How would you manage a large sum of money without attracting attention? Write your ideas in the comments. Let's see how many competent money launderers are among you. But the robbers' problems were created not only by police but by themselves. It was such a high-profile crime that the entire criminal world in Brazil wanted to bite off their piece of the pie. So they were tracked down, kidnapped, extorted, and even eliminated. That's how sadly the iconic tunneling case ended. Culture, then money, then tunnels. Now let's move to where technology itself becomes the main barrier and the main challenge for thieves. Agree, it's insulting to do such global work and get burned on trifles, as happened at the Louvre and the Brazilian bank. But these thieves are still very far from the real drama and greatest failure after the greatest heist in history. We're talking about one of the most guarded objects, the Antwerp World Diamond Center, whose vault was considered an impregnable fortress packed with a dozen modern sensors analyzing any changes inside and out. The preparation and execution of such a job is no less than a special operation. The Diamond Center robbery occurred in 2003, but began 2 years before that, when career thief Leonardo Notarbartolo, posing as a simple diamond importer, rented an office there. He conducted typical merchant activities, communicated with clients, made deals, and built a reputation. And meanwhile, systematically studied the security system, building layout and guard schedules. Leonardo managed to conduct detailed filming of all premises and install a hidden camera before the vault entrance so he could see what code was entered. Thanks to this, the criminals could build an exact replica of the object and practiced breaking into it. On the night of the robbery, they entered the building using Leonardo's pass, bypassed surveillance cameras, descended to the underground vault, and then began creating criminal art. The criminals fooled the magnetic door closure sensor using an aluminum plate with magnets. They neutralized the infrared sensor using a polystyrene screen. On the heat sensor, Leonardo sprayed lacquer the day before the robbery when he entered the vault on business. And on the light sensor, they simply stuck tape. Once inside, the robbers gutted just over 100 safe deposit boxes, whose contents were valued at approximately $100 million, and left undetected. A truly brilliant job that could safely be included in the curriculum at a crime institute, if not for one but. The robbers were found the next day. Leonardo and an accomplice were rushing from Antwerp and along the way decided to destroy evidence. They turned off the highway into a remote area, and Leonardo started burning one of the bags. And at that moment, his accomplice had a panic attack and just scattered the contents around the area. There were no signs of life nearby, so they didn't bother, left everything, and drove off. By some incredible chance, this small forest area had an owner who the next day finds a pile of trash on his property, including draft plans, parts of envelopes with the inscription Diamond Center, videotapes, and remains of a sandwich with salami. The man calls the cops, and they immediately understand where all this came from. Police find a receipt for that very salami, and through store cameras identify Leonardo, detain him, compare DNA with the half-eaten sandwich, and track down accomplices. Grandmas weren't wrong making us finish everything. Leonardo gets 10 years. Caught accomplices get 5 each. The rest managed to escape. In the end, a multi-year complex scheme was given away by a bag of trash and, specifically, a salami sandwich. On my Telegram channel, I'll tell you about another robbery that creates a wow effect. You'll also find other interesting facts there. Subscribe. We've gone from culture to money and from tunnels to high-tech sensors. Now let's move where armed force and aerial stunts enter the scene. But psychology and planning still decide everything. If an attempted robbery of a cult museum or major bank seems like an adventure and risky business, then just the thought of robbing a cash handling branch of one of the world's largest private military companies sounds absolutely reckless. However, such people exist. In 2009, a raid was committed on G4SPMC's cash fund in Stockholm. And raid isn't a figure of speech. The robbers probably decided that to commit such a daring crime, they had to act maximally crazy. And they succeeded. They hijack a helicopter, land on the building's roof, smash reinforced glass with sledgehammers, and enter inside. There, they don't act delicately or complicate things. They just blow up all closed doors and cut off locks. They reach the cash, load it into the helicopter, and fly away. About 20 minutes total. At this time, employees were in the building, but no one decided to stop armed people who were also blowing up everything. Police arrived on call when the robbers hadn't taken off yet, but couldn't do anything. Going inside blindly is dangerous. Unknown how many people are there and whether they have hostages. For the same reason, they didn't shoot at the departing helicopter, which, if damaged, could fall on a residential building. But the most epic thing about this robbery, in my opinion, isn't the helicopter stunt, but how the criminals saved themselves from police pursuit. They scattered metal spikes around the building so cars couldn't chase them from the ground. And at the police helicopter base, they planted boxes with decoys beforehand and wrote "bomb" on them so cops would be afraid to use helicopters. In the end, loud, with weapons, explosions, but without a single shot and without casualties. The robbers managed to escape and take with them approximately $8 million by today's standards. But that's the official version. How much cash was actually stolen from the PMC, we'll probably never know. The problem is that Serbian intelligence knew about the planned robbery and warned their Swedish colleagues. But they initially ignored it, then still decided to use the information, tracked down the criminals, and arrested 7 of them. As we see, modern technologies help police investigate the most daring and thought-out crimes. It was like this at the Louvre, Brazilian Bank, Diamond Center, and many others. But cameras don't protect against robberies themselves. So I'm confident we'll hear about more than one effective robbery worthy of film adaptation. The main thing is that it can make my list, where the core weapon is psychology, deception, and nerve, not blind brutality. And now, as promised, I'll tell you about another unique robbery. Here the stakes shift from money and tech to the human psyche, and the main trophy isn't cash or diamonds, but people's minds. It doesn't fit the criteria of robberies without victims, but this crime's importance lies not in the method and details of its commission, but in the psychological precedent it created. In 1973, repeat offender Jan Erik Olsson decides to rob a bank alone. Not inventing anything original, he acts head-on according to the classic scenario. He enters the branch, shoots in the air, and announces his intention. 2 police officers quickly arrive at the bank. They try to enter the building, but Olsson wounds one of them, takes 4 hostages, and barricades himself inside. Then everything's also fairly stereotypical. He demands 3 million kroner, pistols, bulletproof vests, and a car, a helicopter, and pizza. And additionally asks them to bring his friend Clark Olofsson, who's in prison, to the bank. Swedish police agree and deliver another criminal to the armed robber. They naively hoped Olsson would convince his friend to surrender, but got 2 robbers in the bank instead of 1. And a 6-day TV series about hostage-taking broadcast live. Police all this time prepare to storm and persuade them to surrender. But Olsson and his friends surround themselves with explosives and make it clear that an attempt at forceful capture could turn into tragedy. The criminal manages to call the prime minister and later lets him talk to one of the hostages. And here, the most unexpected thing begins. The hostage admits she's more afraid of police than robbers because over these days they've grown close and understood the main danger comes precisely from law enforcement. After all, they threatened a storm, which could have harmed everyone. And in the hostages' eyes, it turned out the robbers cared more about their safety. On the 6th day, the storm finally happens. They release tear gas into the room, and the criminals surrender. But even after release, the hostages didn't start hating their captors. They hugged them goodbye, spoke publicly about leniency, and refused to give harsh testimony in court. One of the hostages subsequently even became friends with Olsson's family. To explain such unexpected hostage behavior, Swedish psychologist Niels Bierö came up with a term named after the square where the bank was located. But in the world, it became known as Stockholm Syndrome. Here the main loot was not money or art, but trust and loyalty stolen from the very people who should have feared the criminals most. Write in the comments which robbery impressed you most. Those where they stole things, or the one where they stole minds. And that's all for today. Subscribe to the channel, hit like, and I'll continue delighting you with cool episodes. See you!